Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our PatternFly demo. This demo happens every 2 weeks. And if you should have any questions that come up during our demo today that you think are going to require a little bit more guidance in PatternFly, we have our forum linked within our agenda. So feel free to check that out. And we're really encouraging folks to be active on the forum, and we appoint someone every sprint to answer questions on the forum. So that would be a great place to put your questions, and there'll also be time for questions today within our demo. I'll be posting this recording today on YouTube, so be on the lookout and send it to anyone you think might be interested. And we'll go ahead and jump right in. So as far as our interaction design docs, Gina has been working on charts.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to share my screen. So I started going just through the general usage of charts and broke it down by chart type. And so the first kind of guidelines up here apply to all of the charts. And then as we go on, there's area, bar, line, so on and so forth. And each one comes with an example of it visual-wise, and then I'm working on a second part of this that will explain how to apply the charting color system that Michael worked on for a while, how to apply that to charts, and basically just how to use it and what it is. But yeah, this is what we have so far for the first part.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gina. And any questions? All right, we're going to move on to Michael Celadonia on dark theme inputs.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so we've got to make some. We need a dark theme version of our input fields. So I'm just going to run you through why we need those, and then the proposal for them, and then talk a little bit about the impact that'll have to other components. So our input fields work really well on a light background, specifically a white background. This is kind of an older design I found just to show the point, but they work well on white. They also work well on our gray background color if you have to use them that way for whatever reason. But they don't work as well on our new dark background color. And you might think, well, they look, I can read them. Why don't they work? And mainly, I guess, first off, here we're kind of jumping from a white text color to a black text color, which is a little bit just uncomfortable when you're kind of scanning a form and looking at it. And then also, we've got way too much contrast here between the white fill of the input field and then dark background color, which is kind of funny because being PatternFly and being accessibility first, too much contrast is kind of a funny problem to have. But nonetheless, it's just too much. And then most of all, the biggest problem is that one of our main kind of aspects of our input fields is our bottom border. And you might remember we use that bottom border. It's a darker color than the other borders, and we use that to meet accessibility requirements for the input fields. So that's an important aspect, and we also use it in an interactive way. We switch the color from that middle kind of neutral gray to a blue when you're hovering over it. And you can see here, you can't even see that bottom border. And the reason for that isn't just because of the background change, but it's also an interesting kind of optical lesson on how we perceive color when it's next to other colors and stuff like that. So, sorry, lost my place there. So you can see the bottom one, well, you can't see, and that's the whole point. The bottom one's got a blue border and the top one's got a gray border, but you just can't even see them. So here's what we're proposing for our new dark theme input field. And I shouldn't say old dark theme input treatment because that's really just our default input treatment, which is not changing. But we're introducing this new dark theme input treatment. And the cool thing about this that I want to note is that that bottom border color isn't changing at all. It's actually the exact same color as the bottom border in the one above it. You just can't see it because it's next to the white. It's in between the white and the dark background, which makes it practically invisible. Um, so our new background, our new input theme uses a dark background color. We recently updated our color palette to match the digital design palette, and this is our new PF Black 800, and the background is our new PF Black 900. So we're stepping down a color instead of I guess we're stepping up a color in terms of brightness instead of going the other way, which would be way too dark, and you can't really tell the difference between um, if we went like PF Black 1000 versus 900. So we went down to 800. And then as you can see here, the blue also shows up way better. It's way easier to see, and it looks pretty nice too. Whereas above, you can't even tell the blue is there, really. It just doesn't work. So going through our default input treatment, which is, I guess, technically the old dark theme, but it's not changing for light theme. It's just on dark colors, we're changing the styling. But we've got our bottom border, which is our new PF color Black 500. And then when you add that white fill in, this is kind of an abstraction of the colors here to kind of just show you another visualization of the problem. But when you add that white fill in, that border basically disappears. And then when you add the black text on top of it in that third row, it's just a little too much contrast. It just kind of isn't very comfortable to look at. Whereas here with the new ones, using the exact same bottom border color, but instead of the white fill, we're going with the Black 500 fill. And when I say like Black 500, Black 900, those are our variable names, which I listed here, but you can also see the hex values there. So, and then you can see kind of really at the bottom there, it just feels a lot better to look at that circle on the right than it does to look at the circle on the left. You can actually see the border, and even though it's a lot less contrast in the next screen, you'll see it's still plenty of contrast. So, of course, like I said, PatternFly's accessibility is really important, so we want to make sure this all meets contrast requirements. Our bottom border is not changing at all. Again, it's PF Black 500 on top of PF Black 900, and that's a 5.48 contrast ratio, which meets AA, which is the standard that we're aiming to hit. And then the white text on our new background color, which is PF Black 800 on our PF color white, 10.67, which is AAA, which is just like a massive amount of contrast, which is perfect. So no concerns there. So again, we're going from something like this to this, which I think looks and feels a lot better, and it also just functionally, with that important element of the bottom border works a lot better. So what's next? So this is going to impact a lot more than just input fields. So here you're obviously alluding to the dropdown. How's that going to look with that dropdown menu? How are input groups going to work when we've got input groups, again, are buttons that are nudged up right against the input field. How's that going to look? And then button styling. We're also going to be revisiting our button styles on dark backgrounds to more closely align to what the digital team is doing. So we think they've got a pretty good solution for it that I think would work with our light themes as well. So yeah, that's it. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Cool, thanks.
Thanks, Michael. And Gina's going to share card view.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So I'm going to share my screen again. I recently worked on card view, which is just a different way to display content information rather than in a table or a list. And this is what we came up with. This just has some like example text in it. And for hover interaction, it would go from this like smaller shadow to a larger shadow. And then if you were to select a card, the only thing that would appear is that blue checkbox. And we would also recommend not using bottom pagination for card views because it kind of just floats at the bottom if you do put it there. Yeah, I think that's all. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, so I see you've got the toolbar kind of attached to the header. Is that where it should be always? Or are there any use cases where it wouldn't be?
I think we're recommending that for card views, it should be attached to the header. If not, it kind of looks like it's floating. So that's why we did that. But for the other views, it's still okay to do it in the way that we've showed in examples in the past.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Gina. Great questions coming in. And on CSS, Christy's going to share a few updates.
Hi, everyone. So you've probably heard me speak before about how we're handling horizontal scrolling and horizontal overflowing in PatternFly, and that we're going to be hiding scroll bars. And so we tested this across Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Internet Explorer, and that's all good. But there's a use case where if a user has like an old mouse, it only scrolls vertically, not horizontally, and a user like that would need a scroll bar to kind of drag through a list of items. So to get around that, whenever we have horizontal scrolling, we're going to be using these scroll buttons, just like you've seen in tabs before. And so I've been working on how we use them in secondary tabs. So for example, they're basically the same as the primary tab buttons, but they have this really light box shadow on like the right or the left of them to show that the content is kind of fading or overflowing across the screen. And then they're pretty simple. Yeah, when you hover over them, they turn blue. And then this is an example where we have the primary tab buttons and then secondary. So they line up like that. And then the only other instance where we have horizontal scrolling is also the tertiary and the horizontal navs. So this is the exact same thing with the tertiary nav buttons there. And then with the horizontal nav in the masthead, it's the same, but you can see the box shadow on the scroll button is a lighter box shadow. It also shows that the content is overflowing one way. And so then in terms of how that looks in a demo, so this is a page, basically this nav is in, I think it's page main nav element, and that handles that's a negative margin on these scroll buttons. Just make sure. So that they appear to the very edge of this container. But then when they're not needed, the nav item will line up with the padding that we have in that container. So that's scroll buttons. And the other thing is for the expandable table, we used to only have this default case where the expandable content would have to line up with the third column where the text starts here. And we were getting cases from products that were using it where it just wasn't enough space for like a large amount of content. So we become more flexible with this. So now you could have content that spans like all 7 columns here. And then if it's just one TD, one child, it has this nice padding around there. Or alternatively, you can add a modifier to add no padding to your expandable content. And a case for this would be like the compound expansion. So like you want to put a table in it, but the table already has padding, so you don't need any padding. Yeah, and that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Christy. And Michael Coker.
Hey, just let me share my screen. Okay, first up is pretty simple change. We just added support for a horizontal rule inside of the content component. And so you can just drop an HR inside of that now and get a divider with some margin that you can put in between any sort of element in the content component, and it creates the appropriate amount of space as well as the background color that we have across the system for that sort of divider. The second is, this is a pretty big update, but this is, I'm sure you've heard this, I think it was covered in the last demo, that we're updating our color system to be in line with Red Hat brand changes. And so in this PR, which is number 1600, it's in the agenda doc. If you wanted to look at it in more detail, there's quite a few changes. I won't go over all of them, of course. The gist is just updating colors. That you've probably seen these. These are higher contrast, just different types of colors across components. That involves updating the base colors that components would use, but as well as introducing changes of colors. So like maybe a red 100 to red 300 or something for specific types of components, just to make sure that we have good consistency of use of them across the system. That change also introduces dropping the background image from the page component. So you notice in the header here, we no longer have a background image, and just a solid background color across the header. The same for the wizard component as well. No background image there anymore either. The next issue was with regard to the cards. To support like dashboard views and basically just additional stuff that you can do with the cards, we now allow for multiple body elements. And so you can have a header and footer if you want, they're optional, and you can have multiple bodies that creates the consistent amount of spacing between them. The body elements in cards fill by default. We also added a modifier so that you can not fill a card, meaning the body will not grow to fill the available space inside of the card. So you can have one big body and then multiple bodies that don't fill, or two big bodies and whatever. You can specify as many body elements as you want and as many body elements that you don't want to fill as well. The next update was in regard to the compact table. We didn't have good support for, let's see, the expandable version of the compact table. And so we went to design with this and made quite a few changes. And so now you can have an expandable compact table. Part of this update includes adding borders to the compact table by default. So that's a change. Previously, the compact table didn't have borders. There was a slight spacing difference. Now they have borders. There's a bit of a spacing difference, and you always have the option to go back to the previous version with a modifier now. And so you can just say, I want a compact table without borders. There's a little bit more space below this divider and at the bottom of the table, as well as the lack of borders. And then the last issue was in the nav component. The way that you define the separator between nav items. Previously, it was a class that was attached to a nav link, and there was not enough space above and below the divider. So in order to not have to attach a divider to a link and instead just be able to put a divider inside of the nav at like the list item level, the divider that we use here is now an LI with an ARIA role that supports the role of separator. We added top and bottom margin to the divider as well, so that there's more of a visual separation between divided nav items. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Any questions? All right, we're going to move on to taking a look at some website work. And Joachim's going to show preview images for full screen examples and component descriptions.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, two quick things. One is that for the website now we can write descriptions for the components in Markdown, and we can tie that into the component pages. So for example, we have a Markdown file for the alert description, and you can see it's tied in here. Same for the HTML version. So we've got descriptions that we can insert for alerts, accordions, app launcher, etc. So this is going to make it pretty easy to add descriptions on our end into these component pages. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, instead of just showing a full, some examples can only be shown in a full screen page view. So instead of just showing a link, we made that a little bit nicer by showing preview images. So for example, here's a background image, or let me show you another one, login page. So these are preview images that are generated from real URLs. So it's pretty easy to update these images by just running a script. But anything that requires a full screen page view now has a preview image generated, and you can hover over, and then you can click on the this icon to open it up in a separate window, just like before. And yep, that's it.
Great, thanks, Joachim. I see some kudos going on in the chat. Lots of great chat activity today. And then in React, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to skip forward. Any questions for Joachim?
Yeah, Joachim, do you have to generate those images? You have to run something?
Yes, exactly. Basically, you have a JSON file of URLs that you want to generate images for, and then it just ends up checking like the way that it saves those files. It checks that against the location on the website, which is it kind of goes one in one, so it's not too difficult to tie that together.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Thank you, Joachim. And in React, Zach is going to share the new doc site.
Yep, so you guys see? So, all right, so we needed new docs because our current doc builds were taking 25 minutes and we needed some TypeScript support. So I refactored them a lot and I was successful at getting it down from 25 minutes. So they're down to around 2 minutes now. And for reference, here's an old one. So you used to have to wait 25 minutes on your PR to get your docs, and sometimes it would crash somewhere in here. And the new site looks like this. Spent quite a lot of time on it. The biggest parts for developers is that you now write these files just like Joachim was explaining in Markdown. So there's a Markdown file for this, and I can add descriptions or change the layout of the entire page however I want. And we still have the properties and CSS variables, just looks a little different, faster, and that's all.
Great, thanks, Zach. Any questions? All right, Don's going to share skip to content.
Thanks, Rachel. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So skip to content is a component that we have for accessibility with the keyboard. So if a user is actually on a page and they hit the tab button, it will actually bring this button up that a user can enter on, and it updates the link with the URL that they provide. So we have two examples on our example page. This is one that's how it's usually how you're expected to use it, and then there is also an option which is mainly used for demo purposes where you can force it to be displayed. We also went ahead and updated the page demos, layout demos with this. If you bring this up and you start tabbing around, look at the button. Right now, we do have a little issue, right, where it's showing up down on the bottom, but it's supposed to be on the top. We're in the process of fixing that. But other than that, you can navigate around with your tab keys as expected. And that's it. Is there any questions?
All right, thanks so much,
Thanks.
Don.
Yep.
And Tatani's going to share the expandable component. Can't hear you quite yet. We see your screen, still no audio.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I worked on the expandable component. So this allows the consumer to have content that's expandable. So there's a toggle with a button and text here, and if they click on the button, it will expand and show the expandable content, and then they can toggle again to hide it. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tatani. Any questions for our team members today? That is the end of our demo agenda.
On that expandable, does it also toggle when you click on the text or just over on the caret?
Just on the button key. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
yep.
hear you.
So just on the button. Oh, wait. Oh, the text is in the button, so.
Okay, good. That's what I expected it to work as. So.
Okay, great. Anything else, folks? All right, thank you for attending today. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye, everyone.